Revati. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody for joining this webinar. I am Narsimhan, Secretary of Vision India. Joining this call is our founder president, Mr. M.S. Raju from Visakhapatnam. I am pleased to introduce you to Ramakrishna Raju, or Ram for a majority, the Executive Director and the founder of Vision Aid. Here is an engineer, administrator of a Fortune 500 US company and has immense passion for the service to the visually impaired. He runs an international NGO named Vision Aid. At a personal level, Ram graduated from the Birla Institute of Technology in India and moved on to the US to obtain 2 master's degrees, one from Pennsylvania State University and another from Harvard University. With these qualifications, one would expect Ram to rest on his laurels and focus on a lucrative career. But it is not so. For the restless Ram, he chose to create Vision Aid as a global NGO operating in USA and India as a model non-profit today. Ram chose to build a wonderful bridge between his former home India and his new home United States to serve one of the most underserved segment of vision impaired. 15 years of hard work by Ram, well supported by his spouse Revati, many of his family members, fellow volunteers, staff, community, partners have made Vision Aid blossom into what it is today. During his talk, Ram will outline the Vision Aid's overview model and give each one of us an insight into the Vision Aid's many programs, along with many best practices developed over the last 15 years, which have benefited a majority of visually impaired children and adults. And by conducting these programs, Vision Aid has won national and international awards. The awards also include the Derek Bok Public Service Prize from Harvard University and also the Making a Difference Award in recognition of the many accomplishments. With this brief introduction, I turn it over to Ram. And each one of you are welcome to give feedback and ask questions at the end of the talk. Over to you, Ram.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Narsimhan, for that gracious introduction. Good evening to everyone in Boston. It's past 10 p.m. here, and good morning to everyone in India who's waking up. And if there are people from other parts of the world, good afternoon, or whatever time it is for you, and thank you all for joining. Over the next 45 minutes or so, it is my pleasure and privilege to talk about the Vision Aid story. So we'll be talking about the why, what is the problem domain which Vision Aid is trying to address. I'll briefly introduce Vision Aid, the team behind Vision Aid, and where we run our programs, and spend most of the talk on the Vision Aid model. The Vision Aid model is basically a compilation of our programs and best practices, and it documents the what we do and the how we do it. So that's why we'll spend the bulk of the talk. I have a lot of material to get through, so I apologize in advance that at times this is going to seem like an express train running at full steam, because we have 16 elements in this Vision Aid model, and while each element could take an hour easily on its own, I'm going to try to get through all 16 elements in less than half an hour, giving a minute or two to each one. My idea here is to just give a 50,000-foot view of what Vision Aid is doing. And anyone who's interested in more details will be happy to set up additional time, or you can stay back after the call and would be happy to chat. I'll also go more quickly through the initial parts where we talk about statistics of vision impairment and so on, but I did want to touch upon that just to give you an idea of what exactly Vision Aid is trying to solve. So with that background said, the World Health Organization conducted a formal survey in 2010, so it's a little bit outdated, but it still gives us an idea that there are 285 million people with vision impairment, of which about 39 million are blind, and the rest are having low vision conditions. If you look at the geographical spread, 90% of the world's visually impaired live in developing countries, and this map actually shows the prevalence of vision impairment. If you look at the rate of blindness, new blindness, at this time, it's estimated that 500,000 people are becoming blind every year. So if you approximate it, that's about one person becoming blind every minute, either being born or because of aging or because of some medical conditions. The prevalence in poor countries is 5 times more than the prevalence in the developed countries, which are more affluent and spend more on healthcare. And it's estimated that less than 3% of the children who need rehabilitation services and who are visually impaired are getting them. Keeping these in mind, Vision 2020, the Right to Sight initiative, which is under the World Health Organization, declared vision rehabilitation as one of the priority areas of the Vision 2020 initiative. And because we are in 2020 and it's a milestone year, many events are happening around the world. And so Vision Aid actually is organizing this best practices webinar series as a part of Vision 2020. And we are happy to talk about the story of Vision Aid, as well as many of our partners and other speakers who have joined these webinars from time to time. So now looking at the prevalence a little more closely, if you look at this chart, which actually shows the amount of money being spent on healthcare versus the vision impairment, you'll find that India is right at the top. It's actually that right at the top here, actually the highest prevalence happens to be in India. And of course, there are many other countries as well, but India is right at the top there. So just zooming in briefly into India to understand the vision impairment in India. In India, based on the studies which have been done, the estimates are between 9 to 12 million people are blind. And the incidence of vision impairment is much larger. So it's estimated that about 1% of the total population is visually impaired. And India has a population over 1.3 billion. So that's a very large number of people who need vision rehabilitation services. When you go inside hospital settings, the prevalence of vision impairment is much larger because people have already come there with some predisposition to vision. So with those backgrounds in mind, Vision Aid was founded in 2004. So it's been a little over 15 years. We're now entering the 16th year. And the mission of Vision Aid is to enable, educate, and empower the visually impaired so that they can live with independence and dignity. The vision of Vision Aid is to create a network of resource centers which can provide quality devices and services in an affordable price range to people who are visually impaired. The work of Vision Aid can be divided into 3 pillars: enable, educate, and empower. And during the course of this presentation, I'll be talking a little more about that. So who actually is Vision Aid? Every organization is made up of the people who run Vision Aid. So there are actually many groups of such people. I'll briefly introduce them. So on the left here is the board of directors of Vision Aid. It's an all volunteer board. We have a board of directors and a board of advisors. I'm happy to see several of them on the call today. Very accomplished individuals, all volunteers, all have a commitment for service and a passion for the cause. In India, we have a board of 9 members. So those are the 9 board members in India, again, all volunteer, highly committed leaders who are providing leadership to the cause. We also have a paid staff of about 33, and this includes full-time staff, part-time staff, as well as paid interns who are hired from time to time to perform certain specific tasks. So our staff take on very important, essential functions, whether it is opening up a center every day at a certain time and providing certain services to the visually impaired, or whether it's doing accounting and bookkeeping, or whether it's doing technical work to make sure all the technology infrastructure is running. Now, we also have staff who work in partner locations. So we have, through our grants to partner locations, we support the salary of approximately 14 full-time staff. And even though they don't work for us, they work for the partner organizations. It's actually the Vision Aid grants which actually enables those positions. But one of the most important segment here, the largest segment, is the volunteer network. Vision Aid has over 140 volunteers spread over multiple locations. Many of them are in India, and several of them are actually here in the United States. And these volunteers do a range of tasks, whether it is fundraising or whether it is training and coaching and mentoring the visually impaired. So if you actually add up all these numbers, it's over 200 people are involved in Vision Aid, and really 3/4 of them are volunteers, and 1/4 of the total workforce of Vision Aid is the paid staff. And I want to say one thing about the paid staff is that many of them are very talented, accomplished individuals. They could easily leave Vision Aid and actually go and work for a private sector organization and make much more salary and money than what they do, but they stay back and work with us. Some of them have been with us for 15 years, and they're actually here on the call today. So I want to call out and thank all of them, because actually it's their passion and service which keeps the organization running. And they are as motivated with the commitment to service as the rest of us. So really, collectively, this is the Vision Aid family, which keeps the whole of Vision Aid together and running. Vision Aid's model actually has 4 different organizations, 4 different groups. So we partner with eye hospitals. The eye hospitals in India, we currently partner with 3 eye hospitals: the Arvind Eye Care System in Madurai, Sankara Nethralaya in Chennai, and Dr. Shroff's Charity Eye Hospital in Delhi. And these are amongst the largest eye hospitals, not only in India, but in the world, based on the level of volume of patients which they are seeing. We also have several partners in the blind school segment, whether it is Netra Vidyalaya in Hyderabad and Vizag, Seva Bharati in Mangalore, Radha Swami Blind School in Agra, or the Ahmadi Blind School in Aligarh. So blind schools are an area where we have set up resource centers to serve the visually impaired. In addition to the eye hospitals and blind schools, a third category are community-based organizations. These are organizations which actually work in the community to serve the visually impaired. And we work, the flagship center is in Vizag. It's called the Vision Aid Charitable Services Society. We have Milton in Berhampur, CCF in Pune, which is a new center which is coming up this year, and Blind People's Association, which is in Gujarat. And in addition to these physical centers, we also have presence through the virtual online academy, a range of courses which are run online and serving many constituents all over India, irrespective of where they live. And through our some of our recent offerings like the webinar, we actually have a global presence as well. We are seeing participants in this current webinar series from 15 countries around the world. So this map shows the geographical spread of all the locations. I think I already ran through most of these names here, so I'm not going to call them out. But you can see that the physical spread is actually, across most of India. We have locations in south, west, north, and east of India. And hopefully these locations will keep continuing in addition to the strong online presence. So with that background in mind, I would like to just go into talking about the Vision Aid model. So the Vision Aid model is basically a compilation of best practices and programs. And it has been something which has been evolving over the last 15 years. Sorry, I think somebody needs to be on mute. And hear the background noise. If you're unmuted, you can mute yourself. I'm getting a little background noise. Thank you. So the Vision Aid model encompasses all the Vision Aid programs and best practices. It is designed to meet our mission, which is to enable, educate, and empower the visually impaired. And basically, the model aims to provide a holistic 360-degree coverage of the needs of a visually impaired person. And the model is also proactive, so it tries to anticipate what are the new trends coming in the industry, and progressive in the sense that we constantly look back and adjust and tweak the model to fix things which are broken or programs which are not working. So it's something which has been constantly evolving. And I would say that over the last 15 years, it has changed at least that many times. In fact, we made changes to it as recently as 3 months ago. So this is something which is kind of a living and breathing kind of set of guidelines. Okay. So I'll start walking through the first element of the model. And this is where, it's going to feel like I'm going through a lot of material very quickly. So please bear with me. I do have to cover a lot of material here in the next 15 minutes or so. So the first element of the model is functional vision and early intervention. This is the focus on children. So this involves pediatric low vision, functional vision, CVI or cortical vision impairment screening and interventions, camps for special schools. We run many camps through partner locations. So it's not just in the base hospitals or the base centers, but we also run and support camps so that we actually reach people in the community. And we have referral services for children with multiple disabilities. In fact, we have just partnered with the Perkins School for the Blind in India, through Perkins India. And in Delhi, we will be actually providing these kind of referral services for MDVI, multiply disabled visually impaired children. So you can see these pictures here. Most of these photos which you see on the slides, by the way, are from Vision Aid programs. So this is a girl, 3 years old, Shakuntala. She actually came to one of our centers for low vision screening. And this is a picture from last year from one of the special school screening camps conducted in Madurai by the Arvind Vision Aid team. The next element in the model is comprehensive low vision evaluation. So this involves a few different things. The first thing the low vision specialist has to do, and most of the low vision specialists are trained in this area for several years. They actually either have diplomas or degrees in low vision evaluation after completing an optometry degree. So most of them are specialized in these areas. And the first thing they do is a functional vision assessment to understand what are the functional needs, which might vary. So in the picture here, you see that the functional needs of a person who's a senior citizen and trying to manage, how to read his newspaper or look at a phone directory is different than the functional needs of a school boy who's trying to actually pass his exam. So based on the functional needs, kind of a low vision refractive assessment is done. Devices and assistive technology are prescribed, and an initial rehabilitation plan is then developed for that patient. Devices, optical, electronic, assistive aids and devices. So this is a big area in itself, and we could probably talk for an hour or more just about this topic. But at the center of what we do is actually providing good quality devices. So whether these devices are optical aids and magnification devices or non-optical aids or low-cost electronic and digital devices, the optometrist and the team which works at Vision Aid centers has to prescribe the right kind of a device. So this slide shows a few examples. We have a patient here who's using a device which is like a little telescope mounted on the glasses so that they can actually see in a distance. This is a whole range of handheld and stand magnification devices. This is a non-optical device. This was actually developed at Vision Aid itself. And it's a very simple solution where a school student can mount a book on a reading stand and it's still very popular amongst patients. It's a very inexpensive, low-cost device, but still it goes to show that something as simple as that can actually be of great value to someone who's visually impaired and who's constantly stooping over to read the books. So that's an example of a non-optical device. And in addition to that, we would have things like canes and so forth. But some exciting work is going on in the digital and electronic space. So I'll call out one example here. On the bottom right here, you see the digital portable electronic magnifier. So this is something which Vision Aid gets assembled in China, where we were able to actually source a manufacturer to manufacture it at a much lower price than prevailing market prices. And we are now distributing it in India in Vision Aid centers for a fraction of the cost. And just to give an idea of the cost, prior to our partnership with Arvind and Shankar Nethralaya, these devices were being distributed, similar models were being distributed at price points above 10,000 rupees in India. And today the same devices are being given at 500 rupees to poor patients and at a higher price point, but much lower than 10,000 to those who can afford it. So I think we are charging them something like 7,500 rupees to the paying patients. So even the affording paying patient is still paying about 2/3 of what they were paying earlier for comparable models. And that's just one example. There's a device here which is still in the works. We did some early testing, and in fact, we had a student volunteer from Boston who actually went down with his family, and I think I saw his mother Swati on the call today. So welcome, Swati. And this device uses echolocation, so it's actually something which is mounted on glasses. And so, this is something which was field tested in India. We brought back the feedback, and a new version of the device is going to be deployed. A lot of the focus of Vision Aid is on affordability because technology keeps moving and new technology keeps coming, but the expense keeps it out of the reach of the majority of our beneficiaries. So a lot of our time and effort is spent on trying to figure out how to get the costs down so that we can put more of this technology and these modern devices and the amazing wonders of technology into the hands of those who are poor and who cannot afford it. Next is orientation and mobility. So this is an important component of the Vision Aid model. Orientation and mobility has two parts to it. Orientation is basically helping a visually impaired person to negotiate their environment. So this is a visually impaired person understands where am I and where do I need to go and how do I get there. And the second part is the mobility, which is developing the skill to actually navigate safely to that location safely and independently. So you see in the pictures here, the picture on the left in the bottom here is actually a training class in progress in our Vizag center. So we actually train instructors in how to teach visually impaired in orientation and mobility. So they would use blindfolds, as you can see in this picture. And on the right here, you see two cases. So orientation mobility is something which can be taught at a very young age. So the picture on the far right is a young child at the Vision Aid Center in Arvind Eye Hospital undergoing O&M training. And the picture in the middle is a lady who's doing the same at Shankar Nethralaya in Chennai. So computer training is actually kind of one of my favorite programs because this has been around from the beginning, and it's a place where we actually invested a lot of time because we recognize that computers can level the playing field for the visually impaired. So using computers and assistive technology, a lot can happen and a lot can be done. So Vision Aid started this journey well before I think most other NGOs began. So I would say that when we first began, actually very few people were teaching formal structured courses in computers. Today, it's actually become much more commonplace to find that. But we actually developed a variety of courses. There are courses starting from an introduction to computer applications all the way through a diploma in computer applications, which can take up to 6 months. So that's a range of 1 week to 6 months, again, depending on the specific need of the individual and their capacity to learn. And this picture on the bottom here is one of my favorite pictures. As you can see from this monitor, you don't see monitors like that in use. It's an old picture from 15 years ago when they made TV monitors like that. And this is our teacher in Vizag actually teaching a student, this blind girl, for the first time, and this is the first time she's touching a computer, and it's kind of nice to see that sense of amazement and marvel in this picture. And this is something which is playing out every day, even today. So even today, people are coming into the Vision Aid centers. Many of them have never seen a computer before. They have to touch and feel the computer screen, touch the keyboards, understand what a computer is. Then they work with us for periods of time, sometimes 3 months, sometimes 6 months. And in 6 months, they are proficient enough to actually start writing documents, sending emails, going to the internet and searching for things and so on. So you can understand the sense of transformation and empowerment that that creates in an individual. The picture on the right here is actually a more recent picture, and that's from our center in Berhampur in Orissa, where we partner with the Milton Foundation for the visually handicapped. Now, next is mobile training. So just like computers, nowadays mobile technology is another powerful enabler. So Vision Aid actually has a training program in mobile technologies where we train the visually impaired, and depending on whether they are low vision or blind, the training can vary. So the training is mobile apps, and depending on the need of the learner, we would teach them about magnification, text-to-speech, navigation, how to manage currency, and various other applications. In fact, it's a long list of apps which they actually learn. There's a whole category of programs which have been clubbed into this bucket, which we are calling special skills. And each of these programs is a comprehensive set of training, which in itself can take an hour to talk about, but I'll just run through them in a couple of minutes. So the computer programming course has been run for 3 years in Vision Aid, and we actually train visually impaired, both blind and low vision, how to learn computer programming. They spend up to 6 months. They actually learn formal computer training, computer programming from a standard source. So we actually explored MIT and University of Michigan, and finally settled on the course from the University of Michigan, and where we actually have a very friendly kind of a benefactor. The person who actually created the programming course, Dr. Chuck, is a friend of Vision Aid. He donated all his materials and teaching materials, and he's also a supporter of Vision Aid. So it's been great to have him. And using that course from the University of Michigan, several of our Vision Aid students have actually completed computer programming. A new offering under this, which we started last year, is digital accessibility testing, because we recognized employment opportunities. So we actually, to test the waters, we ran a pilot course last year. We got an overwhelming response, and we also got a lot of success. And in fact, an exciting new development, which is happening as we speak, is that a US company is actually talking with us, and they're actually asking us to do accessibility testing for them. So they will actually be paying our students to perform the testing. So this is an example of a programming becoming sustainable, because the visually impaired learners now can apply the skills which they have learned to actually get paid and become independent. And in the end, for many of our students, finding gainful employment is actually a big goal. So that's kind of an exciting development. In addition to that, we recognize that learning is infinite. So we can teach them only so much, but then you have to teach a learner how to learn. So the emphasis is on how do you go online and learn from massive open online courses or MOOCs. And there's a whole series of videos which have been created by our volunteers. Some of them are on the call right now, and I'll call them out at the end. But that's an area as well, an example of one of our special skills program. But it's not just about technology and advanced skills. Sometimes we recognize that people want to learn arts, depending on the aptitude. So we also support special programs in music. And in fact, this picture here you see on the left, yeah, it's not, unfortunately, the lighting is not very good, but you can see a whole set of children. These are blind students. All of them are in Netra Blind School in Vizag, and they are actually learning music. And this is a program which Vision Aid supports. We actually pay for the teachers to come in. We purchase the instruments, and actually, this is the first time these students are actually learning music. And we are told that this is actually one of the favorite classes which they actually have as an activity in the school. And on the bottom right here, this is our programming class of 2019. So after completing the programming course, they all kind of met for a hackathon in Bangalore. So this is a picture from that. Braille is the next kind of element of the Vision Aid model. So we have Braille training, which includes both basic Braille training as well as the use of modern Braille devices like refreshable Braille technologies. And last year, we got a CSR grant from a company which actually supported the purchase of several Orbit devices. This is a popular technology out there for refreshable Braille. So we actually purchased those devices and we're going to be deploying it in 3 locations. That happened late last year, and then of course COVID got in the way. So as soon as things improve and open up, this is an area which we'll actually begin to work on to actually roll out Braille training. Next on the line here is liveliness and employment assistance. So this is an extremely important part of Vision Aid, is basically how do you actually make the visually impaired youth kind of ready to go and become independent and get jobs and livelihood. So in this area, we run a residential training program which focuses on employment. So we started this last year thanks to the generosity of a donor who covered the cost, a residential program for 6 months where Vision Aid students, they're actually just scholars from the nearby rural areas who were screened, brought in, they stayed with us for 6 months and got a deep dive in computers, in English, as well as in appearing for competitive exams, and they actually get prepared for jobs. Then the whole thing is focused on employability and training for jobs. So they actually go through how, the job hunting. So we actually published a book on job hunting. We have a soft skills training course and placement assistance. In fact, we have now a newly created placement cell where there's a placement officer who actually matches employment opportunities with the needs of students. Next here is life skills. So outside of the traditional training, there are many things in day-to-day life which students need help with. Activities of daily living. So not everybody wants to learn computers and programming. You might have a housewife who wants to learn how to do cooking. So there are various activities of daily living which are incorporated into the Vision Aid model. And the Vision Aid model also covers health and well-being. So here you see a picture of the residential scholars actually learning yoga. So yoga was introduced, and you'll be surprised to know that for most of the students, the first time they ever did a yoga pose was actually once they came to Vision Aid, because no one had actually taught them about that before. Another program which we did with the help of a partner, America India Foundation, is a reproductive health training for women. And once again, these were visually impaired young women who had no exposure to this before. So kind of it was very much appreciated and well received. Spoken English is a hugely important program because we recognize that people have to learn English skills. So under the Spoken English course, we have 2 levels, and these were both developed in-house in Vision Aid because we did not find anywhere. We actually don't like reinventing the wheel. So we actually spent quite a bit of time trying to research and find whether others have created it. And we found that no one actually created spoken English courses which are suitable for visually impaired because most of them use visual cues and pictures. So we actually developed 2 levels of courses, and it's a whole team of dedicated volunteers working on it. So there's a beginner's course, there's an intermediate course, and it's taught in both a classroom model and a virtual model as well as a blended model. So here on the left here, you see students in the Netra Blind School taking a class in the virtual. I don't know if you can see in the picture, but there's actually a computer at the end. Instructor is actually talking to them virtually and actually guiding them through a whole range of exercises. And this picture shows this is a senior program manager, Jayanti. She's actually talking to one of our students in Vizag who was admitted to the scholarship program. And these are the 2 locations where we did a pilot. So this is something we are piloting and refining, and we were actually ready to roll it out this year, and then COVID got in the way. But as soon as things clear up, this is a program which we are going to be focusing in a big way because there's a lot of potential. Counseling and referral is very important because counseling at all levels, really, a lot of times visually impaired people who come in, they're afraid and they don't know what to do. They don't know what the next steps are. So sitting down across the table with them, working with them and explaining to them about their condition is one thing. and also talking to them about their rights. What are their rights as a person with disabilities? A lot of them are not aware of the fine print in the law and even the basic kind of privileges which they're entitled to. So kind of training them on all of that is essential. And there's a whole bunch of referral services. We recognize at VisionAid, we cannot solve all the problems. So sometimes it's in fact very common that people with vision impairment who come in may have other comorbidity issues. They might be psychologically impaired, or they might be, they might have multiple disabilities like a motor disability or a hearing impairment. So in these cases, we develop a referral scheme and refer them to the appropriate person for help in their other areas, areas which we cannot address in the VisionAid centers. Now, once all of that is done, of course, advocacy and outreach is very important, because it's not enough to just enable and educate a visually impaired person. For real empowerment, you have to actually bring a change in society. And how we do that is basically a whole range of programs, which is basically going out in the media or through social media. And we do a lot of work in publication through news and through other media, constantly working on the public image, the public opinion. And a very interesting program which we do, and I believe we are the only organization which does it in India as far as I know, is training of sighted teachers. So we have trained 750 teachers. You can see from the picture one of the batches. So these are basically regular bachelor and diploma of education students who are learning how to become teachers in regular schools. And VisionAid works with the school, partners with them, and actually trains sighted teachers on how they can become inclusive in their teaching and in their classroom. And so about 750 teachers actually have been trained through VisionAid through this program. And that's all part of the outreach. Training and professional development of our own staff is a very important activity. So in the bottom here, you can see this was a recently concluded partner training program. We brought together partners from multiple locations into our kind of flagship center in Vizag, and you can see all of them are here. They stayed for a week and they underwent training in these different elements in the VisionAid model. We also have a new portal actually in the last 1 year, kind of an exciting development. You can go to training.visionaid.org, and I think some of you actually use that to register. And through that portal, we are actually imparting professional training through our partners. So there's a whole range of technical courses, non-technical courses, and other courses and resources, including videos, which are available there. In fact, this whole webinar series, which we are running right now, this talk is a part of that webinar series, is actually one of those examples of the VisionAid Online Academy offerings. And moving on, we're almost nearing the end here. Research and development is a very important component of the VisionAid model. So I'd already touched briefly upon the research into emerging technologies and low-cost devices. In addition to that, we also have a focus on analysis of impact, because it's not enough for any NGO to just provide services or devices and assume that it's helping. It's actually important to measure. So we are actually working on a series of initiatives and rolling it out to actually measure the impact of the work being done, to see that is it really making a difference in the life of the visually impaired person, what is working and what's not working. And we are hoping that we can come out with peer-reviewed, published literature with this impact analysis soon. Finally, conferences and events. So this is a kind of an extension of the outreach, but it's a whole separate area in itself. So we participate in several conferences. For those of you who are in Boston, you might have heard of the Boston Accessibility Conference. It's a big conference every year. VisionAid co-sponsors that. In fact, this picture here is from the Boston Accessibility Conference from, I think that's 2 years ago or 3 years ago. We had Chiko Asakawa, who was the keynote speaker, a very well-known advocate. She's a blind employee of IBM, and she has done a lot of pioneering work. So we invited her to speak at the Boston Accessibility Conference. We also participate in other conferences. The picture at the bottom here shows one of our staff, Justin, at the at the Empower conference in India, which is one of the large disability conferences in India. And this last event here, the Inclusive STEM Hackathon, you see all these people here. This is a collection of visually impaired students and cited engineers from the industry, people like Microsoft, Intel, IBM. They actually send their employees, they work with visually impaired students, and we conduct this hackathon for 24 hours where people come together, visually impaired students who have learned programming, work in teams with engineers from the industry, and they actually build interesting projects. And it's an attempt to open up the minds and hearts of the industry to make sure that people, they understand that people with vision impairments have a lot of gifts and capabilities, and to recognize that kind of in a way that's also an extension of the outreach and advocacy and breaking down the barriers. So that was kind of like a quick tour of the Vision Aid model. Boy, I covered probably 16 elements in 16 minutes, and we are not going to take any quizzes, so don't worry if you don't remember. We'll publish this on the website, so you can go back and look at that. But moving forward, if you actually look at the impact Vision Aid had in the last year, you might wonder how many people we are serving. These are the actual numbers from last year. So I'm kind of, if you look at this number, 1,455 people went through comprehensive low vision screening, functional vision and early intervention programs for children. 548 children across our centers went for that, underwent screening. Assistive aids and devices were provided to 444. The actual number is actually much higher, but we are indicating 444 because those are the ones which are subsidized by the grants. So if a patient can afford it, then they are charged a nominal fee to cover the cost. But 444 visually impaired patients were actually given free assistive devices with our grants. Special skills training. These are the people who went through programming. Remember the buckets I spoke about, like the programming courses, digital accessibility. So we had 301 students who went through these advanced training programs. 208 people went through computer training. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to read through all of the list, but in summary, we served approximately 3,500 visually impaired in India through different interventions in 2019. And 2020 was all set to actually increase even more because we were bringing 2 more locations, big locations online. One was our new center in Delhi, which we starting with in partnership with Shroff, and another one in Pune. And of course, COVID then came along and got in the way. But as soon as things clear up, I'm sure we're going to get back on track. And our hope is that these numbers will keep going up every year. But I did want to mention what the count was last year, just to give an idea. But behind those numbers, every number, there's a story. It's really each visually impaired person has their own story, their own life, their own journey. And we never want to lose sight of that. So I just wanted to call out a few of those here. So this picture you see here on the left is Aditi Shah. She was one of our students early on. She came to us in our first offering of the programming courses, or maybe the second. And she also stayed with us and underwent her first exposure to MOOCs, which I mentioned earlier. Subsequently, she actually came to the US here, and she actually went to Georgia Tech, where she continued her mentorship under one of the Vision Aid board members who was teaching at Georgia Tech. Today, I'm happy to report she works at Microsoft. And what's really great is Aditi didn't break off her connection with Vision Aid. She actually turned back, and now she's giving back to Vision Aid as a donor. So she volunteers at Microsoft, and through the volunteer hours raises money, and then she returns the money to Vision Aid so that she can help other visually impaired students and patients that Vision Aid is serving. 2 more students here I'll call out, Bhargav and Pranav. I think both of them are on the call. Hi, Bhargav and Pranav. Bhargav was our first visually impaired student in our programming course. He came back to become an instructor so that he can teach others to do programming. Pranav is our youngest student, I believe, at 14 years. And Pranav is actually now gone on to do a lot of recordings to teach others. In fact, I want to briefly pause to call on Pranav. Pranav, can you unmute yourself and say a few words?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Pranav, and I'm 14, and I'm in Bangalore, India, and studying in 9th grade. So basically, I was I don't even remember which batch I joined. I think it was the 3rd or 4th. I joined. My first connection with Vision Aid was through the Python programming course that I joined back in 2018. So I completed that. It was around 6 to 8 months, and then basically what happened was that, I was just exploring around, and, I got very interested in Mac OS. And so I was running it on Windows, through virtual machines and things like that. And I said that, the tutorials out there for visually impaired people to use Mac OS are kind of thin, in the sense that people start in a series, but they never finish it. And so I wanted to bring about a series that aimed to, I learned voiceover by figuring it out on my own. And so I wanted to share that technology with others. And so that's how, Vision 8 gave me the platform to be able to do the same and, bring out my idea into life. So that way, I'd really like to thank Vision 8, and it's been a great help and a platform. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Pranav. Thank you so much. It's great having you, and great having you as a student and then coming back to contribute as well. This is Reddy, the third person in the picture. Reddy was one of the scholars in the scholarship training program. He actually came from a poor rural family, and he actually spent 6 months at Vision 8, underwent training, and today he's actually employed in a factory working a machine, and that requires basic computer operations. So he learned basic computer skills, basic English skills at Vision 8, and he went on to kind of become independent. This is Bhavya Shah. Bhavya Shah actually came to us to learn programming, and Bhavya actually recently got accepted into both Harvard and Stanford. So we're very proud of him. Bhavya actually came to the US a couple of years back, met with all of us. We had a nice little get together. And those are just 4 names, amongst hundreds of students. But I didn't want to lose sight of the individual, because really behind all of these numbers, there are people, and we should never lose sight of that. Our students and the people we serve are the inspirations. And in fact, we have on the call Sonal Patel. She's one of our star volunteers. Last year, she got the President's Gold Medal because she spent more than 500 hours last year volunteering in her mentoring. And one of her mottos, which she shares with her students, which I think is a great motto for all Vision 8 students, is I succeed when I help others succeed. So this is the circle which we see at Vision 8. It's a wonderful circle. Students who are learning and who have gotten something from Vision 8, coming back and contributing, and this is how our Vision 8 family keeps growing. So that kind of brings me towards the end of the presentation. I know it's getting late, so I didn't want to keep people for too long. The journey at Vision 8 is just starting. We are 15 years young, and there is a lot to do and a lot to learn. I'm sure that the Vision 8 model, which I showed today, is going to look quite different a few years from now. But we believe we have a strong, fundamental, clear model, and this model will help us scale. So as we get more resources financially, we can benefit and impact more people, but we will do it in a thoughtful way so that we don't lose sight of the individual. Because at the end of every service and intervention we provide is an individual who has their own unique needs and background. And so it takes a lot of people working together to actually provide the kind of service we need to provide in the right way. I end with a quote from the famous Helen Keller. She aptly said that the world is full of suffering, but it is also full of the overcoming of it. So that's something we try to remember in the work we do, that the problems we have taken on are immensely challenging, but there are also many amazing people who come forward and help in the appropriate ways to help us meet those challenges. So I'll end with just a few informations about our websites and resources. Our global website is vision8.org. India website is vision8india.org. Our Vision 8 online academy, where we are bringing online several courses, is training.vision8.org. And a new website, which is being built as we speak, is the accessibility website for digital accessibility, using which we hope to actually create several jobs, job opportunities for visually impaired accessibility testers. So we welcome engagement from anyone who's interested. As I mentioned, it's a partnership model. People working together can accomplish more. So anyone who's interested in partnering, please reach out to us. We always welcome volunteers. and support. This is a tough year for all NGOs. Vision Aid is no different. COVID has impacted all of us. So anyone who was inspired by the talk and who's willing to support the programs, we always welcome the support. That's our general email box, info@visionaid.org. If someone wants to reach me directly, Ram, that's ram@visionaid.org, or Mr. VL Narasimhan, who introduced the talk, is the head of Vision Aid India. He can be reached at vln@visionaid.org. And before I close, there are so many people in Vision Aid to thank. I said this, the Vision Aid family has more than 220 people. And, obviously it's not going to be possible to thank all of them because everyone has a unique contribution. But I did want to call out two people. One is my father, Mr. M.S. Raju, who is 85 years old in Vizag. And 15 years back, he had just come out of retirement after a successful career as an IIT Kharagpur graduate in the industry for several years. And I pulled him out of retirement and I said, I have this idea and, can you help? And he readily agreed and spent the next 15 years of his life. I don't think he knew what he was going to get into, but he did it anyway. And I think he built a very strong foundation. So what we see at Vision Aid, most of the work was done by him. I want to give a big shout out to him. And he has built us this strong foundation in first floor. And I think now Vision Aid is ready to move on and build the next few floors in the coming years. So kind of a shout out to him for that. And also, I would be remiss not to mention my better half, my spouse, Revati. So, every spouse has crazy ideas, and this was a crazy idea 15 years ago. And she came forward and supported it. I do Vision Aid as volunteer work in the evenings and weekends. So obviously it takes away time from a lot of things which, I would otherwise be doing at home. So it's because of her support that I can spend a lot of time at Vision Aid. And beyond just supporting, she's actively involved in various capacities as a co-founder and vice president. And in addition to that, the whole board of directors of Vision Aid US, our president, Mr. Ali Rizvi, the entire board, it's too large to name here. The board of advisors, our chairman, Mr. Purandang, and the entire board of advisors, the board in India led by Mr. M.S. Raju, Mr. VL Narasimhan, all our wonderful staff, our volunteers, really our partners. Really it takes a team to get it done. It takes a village, and that's what we have. And may this village continue to grow. So with that, I will now pause the talk and we can actually take any questions.
See a lot of kudos. Thank you, everybody. But I don't see any questions yet.
I do. This is Ali Revati. I do have a comment, but not a question, rather. So, Ram, it was really a very, very enlightening presentation. You did an awesome job. First of all, it was so humbling to see the work that Vision Aid has done in the past 15 years from starting off. So, Raju Sahab, you are an inspiration in India. You can see the fruits, what you have done, what you laid out 15 years ago. And there's a huge team of people who got involved right from the very beginning at Vision Aid. We came a little later in 2013 and 14. But really, Ram, this is very humbling, so satisfying rather, to see that little efforts that we do can change the lives of people who are not as privileged as we are. So thank you, Ram. Thank you, Revati. And thank you to everybody here on the call today who's involved as on the board of advisory board, on the board of directors, or any of those people who are investing their time or money or resources, like you said. This year has been particularly brutal for many, but we, Ram, really very good that we were able to use this, these viral times to create a viral out of our efforts. Everybody, there's about so many people from across so many continents on the call listening to our program, and hopefully after this presentation, we'll have more people who come to us and say, can we do some more programs, engagements, and continue the journey. So this is really, really very good. Thank you to everybody, and thank you to you and Revati, the busy bee in the background who does a lot of work with you, Ram. Amazed.
Thank you so much.
2-4 kilo khoon badh gaya mera because I'm involved in the program. So thank you so much.
Thank you and Deba for everything you do as well.
Thank you so much, Ali Bhai and Dr. Deba, for everything. And thank you to our chairman, Mr. Purandang. He's an inspiration. And so our Reena Handa, Lubaina, Batsamusa, Ram Gupta on our advisory board, and every single Visionate director who's here.
Yeah, we have got Rita, and we've got
Ujwala.
Sudhir Verma, yes, everybody.
Yes.
Aparna.
Yes. Aparna, Bharti Nilani.
Yeah.
Ram Gupta here too. I just came a little late. Yes.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Ramji.
Thank you, Ram.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You're the big enabler for the Shroff Center. Thank you so much for in Delhi and reaching so many people.
Oh, wonderful.
Right. At this point, if
Ram, actually, this is Levine. There is a question I just saw that came up on the chat, which I don't know if you can answer. It says, it's from Krishna, and he has a question. I don't know whether it's relevant, but do these magnifier devices mounted on glasses work well if reading for long? Would you be able to answer that?
Well, that's a question which a low vision specialist would have to determine that. So, it depends on the specific need, how long you need to read. So I don't think we can answer that question here without understanding the specific need. But I would say that there's a range of devices, and when you come to a Vision Aid center and talk to a low vision specialist, they can actually look at your vision, do an assessment, and provide different devices and give you the right combination of devices, and also the guidance and training on what device to use for how long to kind of minimize the eye strain and so forth.
Can I give a few suggestions regarding the magnifier which Mr. Krishna has asked?
Please.
Yes, please do.
Revati, is Raju Saab on the line?
I think there's somebody, I think Deepa wanted to say, Deepa, you were saying something, right? She wanted to give some extra inputs to Krishna's question, Ram and Ali Bhai.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, I do see a few of the low vision patients as such. Regarding this question about the magnifier devices that can be mounted on glasses work well if reading for all. Depends on the patient's need, whether the patient is going to what kind of need, whether it is for the distance or
Can I answer that?
reading. Yeah.
Can I answer that?
Raju Saab, so good to see you.
Yes.
Please do.
This is MS Raju. Can I answer that question?
Please
Okay,
go
so
ahead.
you can carry on.
Magnifiers mounted on spectacles are a failure. They will not work because the magnification has to be focused at a different point than where the eye is. It's too close, so it won't work.
Okay. Thank you. And again, you need to, a suggestion for Krishna is actually go and see a low vision specialist at a center, because every case is determined based on the individual's needs.
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, if anyone has any other comments and questions, please feel free to unmute your mic and you can either state your comment or your question. But otherwise, it's getting late here in Boston, and it's kind of, I know, and people in India have to go to work, so feel free to drop. Thank you all for joining. And we'll stick around for any questions or discussions. So,
Ram, do we want to just have Bhargav speak? Bhargav was our very first Vision Aid Python programming student.
Sure, Bhargav, why don't you say a few words?
He's come full circle, and he's a tutor, and he helps so many of our current students.
Sure. Bhargav, why don't you say hello and a few words about what you do at Vision Aid?
I think he's muted.
Okay.
Okay. Hoping he could speak. Bhargav?
Hello.
Hi, Bhargav. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, so my journey started with Vision Aid sometime in 2016 when just VisionAid when started the Python programming course as a pilot. So I got in touch with Sonal Madam, and from there, from her, I learned about various MOOC platforms like edX, Coursera, and so on. So there I completed, my very first course on edX, which was offered by MIT, and then after finishing that, I got interest to be a mentor for the same program, and then I joined as a instructor in Python programming class, and it's been a couple of years from now, and now even I provide my service in digital heritage, which is started in last year, and very soon we are starting as a second batch from this Saturday.
Thank you.
Yeah. And recently we have come up with some demystification MOOC series, because like we got lots of questions like what is the MOOC, and how actually people can start exploring that, or how actually they can learn from various MOOC platforms. So if you could go to VisionAid USA channel, you will see the entire playlist where Sonal Patel was just facilitating entire series, and we got a few students from Python programming batch, and we almost covered like how MOOCs works, and how each individual can start learning on MOOC. Yeah, so that is all.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bhargav.
Thank you so much, Bhargav. Thank you. And thank you for giving back in such a big way.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any other comments? I'm going to pause the recording at this stage.
All right, then. Good night, everybody. Ram, I'll leave the meeting now.
Okay.
Thank you so much, and good night.
Thank you, Ali bhai.